Welcome to Head, a podcast by FS Investments, where we get personal with the people of financial services. I'm Kirsten Pickens.
And I'm Ryan Robertson. We are the co-heads of distribution at FS Investments.
Today, we're excited to welcome Mike Berry and Kelly Milligan, managing partners of Quorum Private Wealth. And in this episode, Mike and Kelly discuss their decision to go independent after 20 plus years at a name brand firm, the unique team approach they take to working with clients, and their secret to building a truly scalable practice. So let's get started. We're excited for you to hear our conversation today.
Mike, Kelly, thank you all for joining, both of you for joining the Head. We can't thank you enough. I guess where we would like to start is you all have been partners for over 20 years. Marriages don't last for 20 years sometimes. I guess the question that we would start with is, how did you guys meet? And then ultimately, how did you decide to become business partners?
Well, let me start here. So Mike was, when I came into the firm in 2000, Mike was already an incredibly successful financial advisor. He had really built a practice from absolute nothing, from scratch, all on his own, but had a very different kind of transactional practice. And I came in 2000, and I came from the consulting world. So immediately thought that managed money was kind of a way to go. And so Mike and I started going on prospecting calls together. I would try to get in front of C-suite executives in Silicon Valley. And this was right at the height of the dot-com bubble bursting. So everybody wanted to talk and needed a second opinion. So we would start going out on calls together and found that we really had complementary personalities.
Opposites attract.
That's very true.
And really we're able to kind of finish each other's sentences. So we decided in 2001 to formally become a team. And it was obviously Mike had a very successful practice, so that the team split was skewed towards him. And then when we got to 2008, like everything fell apart, and we just decided, okay, this is the time to be full partners, and let's try and like figure out how to rebuild this from scratch.
Yeah, we had originally designed it so that we would unwind my book. I had about 600 clients at the time, and had a good business, but it was entirely transactional. And it was at the point where, I had a couple of kids and everything else, and I woke up every day starting at zero and trying to figure out how am I going to make this continue. It wasn't really a repeatable business model. The client looked totally different. It was successful, but it was very stressful at the same time too. I was influenced heavily by Kelly and his institutional approach, coming in as a consultant, having a pitch book and doing everything in managed assets, much like you would be if you're an endowment or a trust. And so I thought that was where the industry was going to go. And I think in all sense, I did a career change at that point. And so, as Kelly mentioned, we started out disproportionate. We had a 10-year plan to get to equal, because I felt this is going to be really important that we are on par with each other if we're doing this together and developing all these clients together. When the 2008 came, I just said, you know what? We're not waiting any more years. Let's do it now. And it was, it tells you a lot about Kelly. He was like, well, no, wait a minute. It should still be disproportionate because that's the plan. I said, no, we're even, from this day going forward, let's do it. And it was probably, the real beginning of our growth and trajectory from that time. Just like when Kelly first got in the business in 2000, he got his license in March of 2000, which was the peak of the dot-com. So everyone, and Kelly was very aggressive, was great with calling and getting in front of people, and obviously very intelligent and came across very well with C-suite executives. And no one wanted to talk to their own advisor because they were so upset with him, and whatnot. So he got through with it very well, starting out fresh. And we kind of looked at what happened in 2007 and 8 the same, that it was just a huge opportunity when everyone else was freaking out. And from there, it really blossomed. Right.
But getting back to your question of what makes a marriage last, I think our marriage lasts, marriages of financial advisors, I think break up either because there's ego or greed. And what I so appreciate about Mike there wasn't greed. You heard his explanation of how we kind of came to parity in our in what we did together, and no one on our team has an ego, and that's really critical. Like when we broke from our former firm, we were all document processors. No one was a financial advisor. There wasn't one on our team. We were all processing documents and making DocuSigns for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So check your ego at the door. We all have to repaper our book that we took the last 23 years papering, and now we're doing it in 3 months. So it's that kind of humility, I think, that that makes it work. And also, what's different about us is we are a true team as opposed to a work group.
Yeah, we want to dive into that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've flown around the country, talked to a lot of folks working together, and many of them are work groups in that they just share resources and each has their own separate batch of clients.
Well, I want to just say or compliment you for the way you said no ego and no greed, right? I have a favorite quote by Harry Truman. It's amazing what you can get accomplished when you don't care who gets the credit. And it's so true. You just have to check that at the door. And so, I mean, to your point, 20 years of a very successful partnership because of those reasons, but you also were 20 years at a very large bank. And you just recently, a couple of years ago, right? Is it 2.5 years now?
2.5 years. 2.5
years ago, you decided to go independent and start Quorum Private Wealth, where you're both managing directors. So how did you arrive at that decision to make the switch?
So, after, our 40 days in the desert, so to speak, we were at Merrill for 32 years, a little over 20 for Kelly. And we really built our team, as we mentioned, slowly over time, as we've had a capacity need. We slowly sought out the right person, the right cultural fit to join us. So we had 8 people working together. And we'd gotten to the point to where, as much as we loved Merrill Lynch and the culture of Merrill Lynch, it had changed very much when they became owned by a large bank. And the decisions that we had to deal with our clients always had an interference from that company that put the shareholders of that entity first before our client's interest. And there was a lot of conflict in our opinion. So we decided it's not the right place for us. We actually had started looking at alternatives prior to the COVID lockdowns. We lived in California, so it was pretty severe there when that ended up happening. And we were actually in decision to go to another major firm at that point. And then the lockdowns happened. Got to work from home. We called timeout on any move and any decision to leave Merrill at the time. And so we start working at home, and we collaborated continuously on Zoom and everything else we were supposed to, but we did that anyway. And after a couple months, we realized that we're not dealing with management. We're not in the environment of the office, but our own ecosystem, I guess you could say. God, we were really good. Our clients really like us. We kind of realized that the value that we put forward isn't the name on the building. It's us. And so we talked about it and decided, you know what? Why don't we take a look at the independent side? And so we dove into that. We did due diligence, looked at what was out there. We ended up getting to know the people at Sanctuary pretty well. Most of the people that started and ran it came from Merrill Lynch. They spoke our language. They knew where we were coming from and what we were looking for. And we decided to make that move. And I think when we talked about, Kelly was talking about culture of our group and our attitudes about business and about people and everything else. We were a team of 8 coming from a big firm, and you have guaranteed benefits, security, where your paycheck's coming from, versus 2 knuckleheads like us saying, hey, we're going to do this. You want to come along with us? Trust us. We don't even have a bank account yet. We haven't filed the name of our company with the state yet because we're still employees of this firm. This is going to, we're pretty sure this is going to work. Walk away from the security of what you've done. I mean, a lot of our employees were at Merrill for 20 years or more as well. every single one of them came with us. And to us, that's when we knew we did the right thing.
That speaks volumes.
It spoke volumes. And since then, we've grown quite a bit, with more people coming on. We've added to that corporate culture that we have, and we've even expanded to another office with another person from Merrill Lynch on the East Coast, from a big secure office, decided to join us as well. So it's been a really good experiment, and so far it's worked.
So what you both are referring to me, what I keep hearing about is leadership. And Kirsten and I are co-heads of distribution at FS. We oversee we have terrific managers, but ultimately our division is about over 100 people. And you two have been talking about trust and humility and, your team following you into maybe this unknown new firm called Sanctuary, which you guys were just named the top firm of the year at Sanctuary, which is an amazing honor. Congratulations. What is your leadership style? How are you able to do that? Humility is easy to say, but it's harder to maybe sometimes demonstrate and get your team to follow. I'm just curious about your leadership style and how you're able to do that.
Well, I think Kelly will have probably a lot more defined description of this, because I think that's part of the differences on how we think about things. But I think it's process that we've developed over time with really clear, distinct roles, but not roles that define you as just that role. That anyone on the team has in our group has the ability to speak out, have opinion, say, hey, I actually think that maybe this is a better idea or a better way to go about it. We named our firm Quorum, one, because trying to launch a business in the 2020s, there's not a whole lot of URLs left that you can get. So I started developing a list of names over the course of the 6-7 months while we were building the firm, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night or catch in the day, and I just created this. And so when we would meet as a group, we got to the point to talk about names. Everyone's saying like, well, what should you call ourselves? I said, here, I got a list.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And so we started narrowing things down, and then we thought about how we operate in that we're specialized in different areas. I mean, Kelly has a great legal and consulting background and so much more. He's just one of the best financial advisors, I think, in the country by far. And has grown into that. Sue, who is a former Ernst & Young partner, ran the internal audit for Morgan Stanley for years. Brilliant, in a lot of ways, from an accounting and tax background. Melissa has a master in finance and is a certified financial planner and an excellent analyst as far as aggregating client data and building client proposals and everything else, and just a generally nice person. I have my investment background from the years, and I do a lot in the public side as well. And so together we work very well at sitting down and making decisions together, like you would in any type of a board or a group. But more importantly, we pull in the clients, CPAs, their attorneys, other family members, which is a big part of our business, multi-generational. So we have clients that bring in both their parents and their kids, brothers and sisters. So a lot of the decisions we make is built around the entire group and how they, see the decision that we're discussing, and we reach a quorum. That's basically how we came
I love that name.
Yeah, that's how we came up with it. So we felt it was not just unique, but it truly described what it is we do.
Great.
Yeah.
So you asked, how do you arrive at your leadership style? And I would agree, process is really critically important to us. And the idea that we don't think we have the best mousetrap. We're open to every possible suggestion of process improvement, whether that comes from the employee we just hired last week or from someone who's been, with us for 20 years. I'm open to all ideas. And that's one of the reasons why we go to a conference like the one that we're at now. It's you steal the best ideas from other teams gladly and openly, and we share them with other teams, and they steal them from us. We're totally fine with that. So process number one. Number two, I would say communication. We take great pains as a team because we are a team. We're not a work group. So we work on all of our clients collectively together. Now, we're going to have lead people who deal with each client's issues, but look, if Mike gets sick, some clients' financial circumstances don't stop because he's sick. The rest of the team needs to know where we are, and we need to keep moving the ball forward for that client. So it's we really emphasize communication. We just had our Tuesday team meeting this morning. Takes about an hour and a half. We go over every open task for every client together as a team. We have our Touch Base Thursdays, which is kind of where we all sit around the table and have lunch together and discuss, here are new clients that we've onboarded, what their background is. Here's new baby was born to one of our clients last Thursday. Want to make sure that everybody on the team knows who that is and what that's about. That kind of interconnectivity, I think, is really critical. You can decide to communicate like that as a leader or not.
It's also the time that we talk about our own lives and families and everything else.
Yeah.
As well. So everyone's up to speed with what's going on with each other.
Well, as you said, everything, you get best practices from others. You're constantly pivoting. So we might borrow that Touch Base Thursdays for our own meetings, just so you know. I really like that. Touch Base Thursdays.
Really
it's great. And the attendance in the office is amazing on Thursday. We have a nice lunch coming.
I bet.
Every
That's
time.
fantastic.
We sit around. We have a couple large, we have a large conference room and some dining tables and everything else. And it's kind of like brothers and sisters sitting around. Yeah.
Well,
it's kind of good.
You kind of have already answered this. I just want to dive in maybe a little bit more. I was reading all up on your website. I love all the quotes that you guys have on there about your team, about Quorum. But you talk a lot about being a life advisor versus a financial advisor. And so maybe dive into that a little bit more. And another thing that I found really interesting, and again, you did touch on this, but you're not a work group, you're a team. And so every single one of your clients meets every single member of your team, which I don't think that is always the case. I think that's pretty rare. So you want to dive in a little more there?
It's definitely a differentiator. So yeah, I'm curious what that looks like.
Yeah, and it can sometimes be a little more overwhelming for some clients versus others. And they end up gravitating to one person, and that's who predominantly serves them and whatnot. But there's always availability. And what's great about, like, for example, we had our weekly team meeting this morning, in which we go through every open task, what's going on with individual clients. It's on that list until we are all in agreement that that task is completed and it doesn't fall through the cracks. So from a process standpoint, that's really good. We also do that. So if we're out at a conference out of town, like we are today, and a client calls in, checking in on this open task, whoever answers the phone knows exactly how to address that, where it stands and where it is. We were just talking about that this morning. We just completed it. You'll see an email from us later on, so on and so forth. And that's actually very powerful, because it isn't something where 2 weeks later you get a call from somebody and saying, hey, remember that transfer I asked you to do for my kid's 529 or whatever? What happened? Oh, no, I don't know. Let me go check. We know the answer right away. And likely it was already done. As far as when you're talking about being a life advisor, in our typical client meetings, which we would do them quarterly with everyone. Most people don't want to see us that often because there's process involved. So they kind of feel they're getting a lot of touches throughout the year. I think for a lot of people in our industry, they would rather sit there and talk about their investment in their portfolio and use jargon and talk about variance and standard deviation and all these kind of things and explain their way out of, either up and down why performance was great, good or bad. We have a very clear presentation on your performance and why it was and what we're thinking about new ideas. That maybe takes up anywhere from 5 to 30% of the time that we spend with that client, which could be 1 to 2 to 3 hours. The rest of the time, we're talking about their family, about their financial goals, about where things are going, their estate. Just a bunch of other things. We spend very little time on the investment, which I've always found fascinating, because you get in this meeting, you watch like, oh, wow, we've been doing this for 2.5 hours. And there's a lot of notes and a lot of information. But if you really nail down how much time we spent on the investment, which is the only reason, we're some of the clients think they're there, and really look at where we're truly adding value. It's all the other things. And I think that's important for us, because we're only paid for the investment. Right? Our whole relationship is based off the amount of assets that we manage for that client. We end up referring them to another circle of influence, whether it's an attorney or accountant, or start dealing with things that they have coming up with their family, or sometimes even personal problems they have and dealing with their kids. And, they have a lot of wealth and they're worried about their kid. And then we come up with a plan of how we're going to meet with their adult children and walk them through it, because the 22-year-old doesn't want to listen to mom or dad, because what the heck do they know?
Right.
Right. So, and the fact that we have kids that age too, it's actually pretty good. And so we do quite a bit of work, extensively with families on that. We don't charge for that. That's all pro bono, but we are, because that's what the relationship is. So, and it doesn't matter if you have 100 million with us or $1 million with us, we're not going to treat you any different.
Let me give you an example, because you asked of, how do you give advice that's different than just the financial? So we had a client come in, very, very successful author, best-selling author, extremely busy, as most of our clients are. And he and his wife came in 2008 and said, listen, we've figured out what our next big chapter, no pun intended, is going to be in our life. We're going to buy a plot of land, dirt, and we're going to build our dream home. It's going to be amazing. French Chateau. It's going to be incredible. And we're listening to it. I'll never forget, Mike said, okay, I've heard what you said. I think that's a terrible idea. And you could just see the blood drain out of the husband's face, like, oh man, I'm going to pay for that one. And the wife is just like starting to get, feathers are starting to rise up. And he says, here's what we know about you. You're extremely successful. You are incredibly busy. You run a consulting firm. You author books. The wife is meanwhile running a home with 4 active young boys, driving every different direction, all of the meals. She runs everything in the background. How are you going to accomplish all of that and be a general contractor? Your marriage likely won't survive. You will have massive cost overruns. This will go over time and over budget. It will be a disaster for you. Here's what we would recommend. It's 2008. There are plenty of homes that are on the market now that were taken back from the bank and are finished, move-in ready to go. You call your realtor, go on a tour with them, tell your realtor, I only want to look at French chateaus that are all built. And if you can't find one after a month or two of looking, okay, then let's come back and revisit this goal. So they went away. They were kind of crushed and dejected and like, wow. 3 weeks later, they call us. They're bubbly, giddy. Oh, that was so great advice. We found a place. We're moving in 4 weeks. And to this day, whenever that client comes in, they will say the best advice you ever gave us had nothing to do with stocks and bonds, because you knew what our life was and you gave us advice that was objective and something that we couldn't see because we're in it.
That's a great story.
And they definitely could have fired us at that moment.
Yeah. But the honesty, but to be honest and to give direct, experienced advice is why you all are who you are and why you've been so successful. So Kirsten and I launched Head to Head because, frankly, we're just fascinated with financial advisors. We've been traveling the country for 25 years, each of us, and talking to financial advisors all over the country. And we just love the stories, and we love to hear about how you all built your practice, which you've told us about. One of the things you all have talked about here is this one particular client, but you've also mentioned Silicon Valley. And we'll have lots and lots of people listen to this podcast, and they'll be interested about Silicon Valley and clients and C-suite executives. And we watch CNBC all day, and you hear about Meta and Google and Apple and all the Silicon Valley companies. What is it like to be in the heart of Silicon Valley as financial advisors and prospecting those types of people?
Well, in 20, maybe 30 years of doing this, you learn a lot of lessons. We work with a lot of people who have built their wealth from concentrated stock, from the very companies in Silicon Valley that you're talking about. Could be technology companies or biotechnology companies. And we always tell clients, and I stole this line from another advisor. I take no credit for this line at all. But we tell our clients, you make your money first, we'll make your money last, right? So they've oftentimes experienced this explosion in wealth because they own concentrated stock in the particular company that they're working for. And I'll never forget this one appointment that we went to. This had to be in 2002, right at the height, the height of the dot-com bubble.
Everyone was genius.
Yeah. This was a prospect, did not ultimately become a client. So we go visit this guy. He is the CEO of a fabless semiconductor company. So they design chips and send them somewhere else to be created.
He used them in the last couple of years.
Yes.
Yes.
Keep going.
So he owned 95% of the stock of this company. And he comes into the meeting with like this rumpled shirt and, just kind of looking generally disheveled. And we started asking him about his life. Yeah. And we're like, so, do you own or rent your home? Oh, I rent my home. Oh, okay. What does your balance sheet look like? Oh, well, I have like $30,000 in my 401k. I've got, maybe a couple $100,000 in my bank account, but I'm also worth $10 million because of the, the value of this stock. And we're like, you're not worth $10 million. You're worth nothing until this gets sold. You can't live inside of shares of stock.
It's not public yet. It was still private.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So
Balance sheet.
yeah.
And I'll quote him, but it is the next Microsoft.
Yes.
Okay.
So we were like, look, you have to appreciate your exposure to the risk of the successes and failures of this company. You get your salary from this company. All of your stock is in this company. You get ongoing stock option grants and RSUs from this company. You will probably not be able to sell with the regularity that you want because you're a Section 16 insider with this company. You are massively exposed and your balance sheet is more lopsided than any other that I have ever seen. And, part of our job is to get you to appreciate that risk and take appropriate action. And he was like, listen, the dumbest advice you could possibly give me is to sell a share of this stock because it's going to be the next Microsoft. And we're like, okay. That's not what our experience has been. And we shared with him the story of another prospect who became a client. And that prospect was, at the time we met him, worth $1 billion on paper. And we sat around the table and we said, you know what? We think you should sell. And this gentleman's company was public, so we could do this. We think you should sell $20 million. Pay the taxes, you'll have $10 million after taxes.
Pay 40 and keep 20.
Yeah.
Sell 40 and keep 20.
Sell 40, keep 20. And years from now, we will laugh about what idiots we were for giving you that advice. I mean, what utter, jerks we were for selling at this low price because this will be, massively successful.
Stock was over $400 a share. Could be going straight to 1,000.
Sure. And then within a year, and so they did that, paid the taxes, had the $20 million. Within a year, that company was zero.
That was better.
Okay.
Wow.
Split adjusted. I mean,
They love you.
yeah. So that's all they had left.
Yeah.
All they had left. I mean,
that money they actually were able to buy back a bunch of the remaining shares of the company. They spun it, changed it into a different one, ended up becoming a great wealth generator for them that later on.
So we shared that story with the rumpled shirt guy, and he was like, not hearing you.
Not me.
And sure enough, his company met the same fate, went to zero, within 2 years. So being in Silicon Valley, you kind of get to see it all.
Yeah.
And all of our advice to clients starts with an understanding of their balance sheet and really a basic financial plan. What are you trying to make your money do? And again, you can't live inside of shares of stock. You can't send your kids to college with shares of stock unless you sell them. You can't retire on the dividend stream of shares of stock that don't pay dividends. So, that's part and parcel of the experience that we get in dealing with Silicon Valley folk.
Being at Merrill Lynch 32 years like I was, there was some accumulation of Merrill stock, and then that became the bank stock. At one point, it was $115, $20 a share. With three.
Remember.
So, and I accumulated a lot of stuff that I couldn't sell. It was locked up, right? So I personally got to experience, net worth, huge inflation of net worth and complete collapse of it altogether with stuff I really couldn't control. And so when clients can have some control, and there's several ways for them to, and even an insider for them to have control of, what they own and create some, monetize some of it from time to time and take some of the risk off the table. It's our job really to show them how to do that and not end up regretting it later on. I mean, you can always regret it if it keeps going up, but if you're going to continue to get more and more over time, it's just totally different. Something else about being where we are in Silicon Valley, we have not just technology. When you think Silicon Valley, it's also a real hub for biotech.
Yeah.
And so a large percentage of our clients actually do come from the biotech space. And those are very different people as far as mentality. A lot of them have come from either the medical or biology fields.
They're scientists.
They're scientists,
Right.
and they come from different areas. And it's a different challenge and everything else. But it's been fascinating because when you sit in a room with a client that you're advising and you know that if you were to take an IQ test, they're probably smarter than you, right? And everything else. And you're going to try to go through that. And, luckily that's why we have so many of us in our side, in our quorum to kind of collectively, be as smart as some of the people we deal with. It's a different challenge, but like Kelly said, I mean, our job isn't to make our clients wealthy. They come to us, they're already wealthy. Our job is to not mess it up. I don't usually use the word mess, but
Right.
they're really good at building wealth. We help them manage it and not mess it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we're coming up on time. There's two more questions we want to ask you. We'll make them quick, but they're important because Ryan talked about why we wanted to launch this podcast. All the last 25 years of us being in the industry, meeting with such impressive financial advisors. And another piece of it is philanthropic work. And you guys do so much of it. Another piece and reason why we wanted to launch this podcast is to just create more awareness to diversity, to women, to youth, to come into this industry. Because, we interview people all the time and we're getting less and less, it feels like, diverse candidates coming through. And so just looking at some of the things that you guys do from a philanthropic perspective, and particularly in financial literacy, would love to hear anything that you would like to share.
So we're pretty committed to financial literacy on a lot of fronts. Sue Mazzetti, our partner, is the president of Financial Women of San Francisco, which is a big advocacy group for women's financial literacy. We are now in our 10th year of doing a 6-part financial literacy series for the graduate schools of business at Berkeley, Stanford, and Wharton. And we're doing that because I came out of UCLA. I went to business school and law school at UCLA. I took literally every course you could possibly take in both of those schools on securities analysis, investments, tax, estate planning. And what I realized was 90% of what we're talking to our clients about, we learned on the job.
Totally.
They don't teach it in an academic curriculum. You learn it through application. So we talk to these students about some of the things that they're going to see in offer letters. You're going to see the words, incentive stock option, restricted stock units, non-qualified deferred compensation plans. What do those mean? So we do that. And then, personally, I'm involved with Boy Scouts, even though now it's scouting. So it's not just boys and girls. My sons both have eagled out and gone off to college, but I'm still involved with the troop as a merit badge counselor. And the merit badge counselor is most near and dear to me is the personal management merit badge, which is about time management and money management. And a lot of the material that we adapted for the graduate students of business at the top business schools in the country came out of that merit badge curriculum. It's because they just don't teach it. And it's so fundamental. And
Fundamental.
I think when you really explain to people the basic mechanics of finance, it's enlightening. They like to hear it.
Really is. Matters to everyone.
I started the foundation with a friend of mine back in 2010 about, and has grown over the years. And we did it through a social organization in our community, and actually grew it because it's an affluent neighborhood where we are. There's a lot of people that fall through the cracks. So single mothers and children in need and things like that. And through our contacts and members of this organization, we've given away well in 7 figures over the last several years. It's ongoing. I've stepped off of it. I'm just emeritus now on it. But that was very, very satisfying to do and build it up, create the whole guideline for it and everything else. And then every year, sit down with the, reading the grants and deciding, who we give to and whatnot. That's been phenomenal. And then for the last 6 years, my focus has been working for a private girls' high school, and been a trustee for them on development and fundraising, but also helping them with their finance side. When I was in my previous firm, I was limited to how much I can help on that. Now I can dive much deeper into it now and help them with it. And so not only have we really improved, how they manage their own assets and everything else, but on the development side, we've built incredible athletic center where they didn't have it before. Technology STEM center, which has been awarded the best STEM center in the country of any high school. And recently we just did a wellness center with where girls, if they're having issues and coming out of COVID, a lot of kids have big issues where they need extra counseling. They need a meditative center to go to and everything else. And we actually took part of the old convent that was there and we repurposed it and brought that in, and through those donations, it's been an incredible amount of work. So I kind of feel good because both my daughters went through that school before I got involved in this area. That there's a legacy there that hopefully they step into at some point in the future.
So, Mike, Kelly, this has been a fascinating conversation. Really, really interesting stuff. So last question goes to each of you. On Head to Head, we like to end each conversation with this one question. So you can each take a shot at it or crack at it. If you could give one piece of advice to your 20-year-old self, what would it be?
Mine would be to remember that financial advisory is a marathon, not a sprint. And I know that's a kind of a cliched phrase. But by that, I mean, what we just did our transition 2.5 years ago, and there is no candy coating the amount of pain that goes through transitioning assets and looking at your book. And when you're going through it, you realize how many one-offs there are just in the course of dealing with clients. Oh, we brought that mutual fund in position, and why did we do that? Why is it the only position in our entire book with this one client? Or why are we using this one manager with this one client? What are we doing there? So to back up 20 years and say, be ruthlessly intentional about how you are building a scalable practice that not only serves, obviously, the investment needs of clients, but gives you as an advisor back the time, because you don't have to study those one-offs or relearn why you did that. You, if you have kind of similar building blocks with every client, you can spend a lot more time on what really matters to clients, which is the other 70% of our conversation, talking about family and goals and all of that stuff. So that's what I would do, is remind myself to be streamlined and intentional.
If I was to go back to my 20-year-old self, as I was later in my 20s, as I entered this industry, I think it was important for me because I really came from no experience or background or example in my life prior to doing it, to not buy into the fact that this is my only path, right? Use it for the experience, really become a polished professional there, which I did. But I waited until well into my 50s before I made the decision and gained the confidence to go off on my own and do this and do what we've created. I think we've created a really good entity and a really good brand. And people have asked me, more than once, like, what would you say about yourself now that you've done this? I said, I wish I did this 10, 20 years ago. Right? Because it was something where I had to have that motivation to do it. And that entrepreneurial spirit and being able to go and do that on your own, I really appreciate our clients more that were entrepreneurs themselves, who were risk takers, who went out and did something and built something on their own. And instead of having, working for a brand or a name on a building that someone else created over the time and have pride in that, which I did have. I mean, Merrill was a wonderful name. The pride that we have, or at least that I have, I'm sure that you do too, have our own brand on there that we created and whatever. It would have been nice to have that for the last 20 years or so, but I really look forward to the next 20 and beyond of what we're going to have that out there, because I don't think it's going away.
Believe in yourself, have confidence in yourself even earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's well said.
Definitely, you have to be an entrepreneur to do well in this industry, whether you work for in a W-2 corporate employee scenario, or if you go do it yourself. The difference is actually doing it, taking the risk, executing, figuring it out, make mistakes, learn from it and continue to evolve. And that's, really something that I wish I knew better when I was younger, that we can do it, but
better late than never.
Life. Better late
never
than
too
never.
young.
That's right.
Definitely learn that you're never too young to change. You're never too young to try something different. And, you're always going to be rewarded if you believe in yourself and do it, even if you fail, that you tried. It's either to get, to the sunset of your life and like, God, I wish I did all these things.
Well, that's a very inspiring way to end this podcast. Thank you guys both so much. It was such a pleasure talking with you both.
Thank you for having us. A lot of fun.
Thanks for joining Head to Head.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To get the latest episodes as soon as they're available, be sure to subscribe to the Fireside Podcast.
For more on this episode, visit www.fsinvestments.com/head-to-head. This episode was edited and engineered by Aaron Sherman. Video was produced by Melissa Venditti and copy provided by Harrison Beck. Special thanks to show coordinators Laura Coleman and Ellie Zhang. Thanks for listening.